Thanks for staying with us here on The Real Story. We've been talking all about the upcoming legislative session, which starts February 7th. Here to help me break down more of those priorities and proposals being drafted is Randy Collins, Associate Director of Public Policy and Advocacy for the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities. Randy, thanks so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me on.
So first, tell me, for those who don't know, what is the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities and what do you do?
We are the state league representing towns and cities before the legislature. We also work with our federal delegation. We currently represent 168 of the 169 towns and cities throughout the state. Our board of directors is made up of the mayors, first selectmen, town managers that represent towns, urban, suburban, rural, across the state, and
Wonderful.
We basically advocate to, for funding and to make them whole throughout the legislative process.
Nice. So who's the one that isn't represented by you?
Right now, Vernon is
Okay.
the one member that's not on. That's not a member.
I had to ask. You have 168 of 169.
Every time I testify at the legislature, I am asked that question. So we hope we'll get him back.
So this is obviously a short session coming up, but there's still lots to do. What's on communities' minds? What are the bigger picture themes you're hearing that you want lawmakers to work on?
We're going to continue to work on. Last year, we saw a significant increase in education funding.
Yep.
And part of that was $150 million in education enhancement. So we are looking to sit down and work with the legislature of how that $150 million is going to be spent, and we want to make sure that it is being divvied up and used where it'll best impact our municipalities. So we've already started those conversations and hoping hoping that going forward we'll continue to see some good increases there. Our towns are always looking for additional education dollars on top of that. Special education is one of those areas. We know the legislature is talking about mandate relief, some of the mandated costs that are imposed on town, often without money that comes behind it. So the towns are forced to increase property taxes to pay for that. We're hearing that they're looking at mandate relief on the education front, which would be a significant win. It's not always about getting more money, but at times it's about being able to spend it more efficiently.
Right, and money always on people's minds, especially cost cutting, especially right now with record inflation, high bills, a housing crisis, and more. How are inflation and tax burdens showing up for CCM's priorities this session?
Well, I think when we look at a lot of the proposals that come forward from the legislature, a lot of them are very well intended, and I think the concern is it's a very good idea. How do we pay for it? And towns are limited to property taxes as our sole source of revenue other than, state aid. But so when we get costs that aren't accompanied with money from the state government, our opportunity is, our ability to raise money to pay for it goes through property taxes. And we've seen a lot of shifting with real estate values are high, car values have been very high. So that represents a burden. But even without new programming, costs are continuing to rise. Energy, insurance, healthcare, those municipal costs continue to go up. We have to figure out a way to pay for them.
And let's talk about that state money, or sometimes lack thereof. We still have a rainy day fund, a surplus, really huge, that Connecticut has not always been used to having. The governor and lawmakers have kept strict fiscal guardrails in place, but everyone wants a piece of this pie, of this extra money. How is this affecting funding priorities and asks this year?
This is the second year we have a biennium budget, so it's a budget that's set every 2 years. The second year really is intended to limit to budget adjustments. So I think we're working with our membership, and while we certainly have our share of asks of the legislature, we are cognizant of the fact that it's a second year of a budget, that there isn't going to be a lot of new revenue coming out.
Right.
So I think we're looking to shore up some areas, but at the same point, we're looking also, again, it's not always new money. It's how can we spend the money we have better? Is there any ability for towns to save money, maybe not have to, pay into the same programs, fund the same different things? So I think that's where that balance is. And while the fiscal guardrails are important, there is some aspects. One area we're looking at is there was a bill last year the governor did veto, but passed unanimously in the Senate and the House, which would have restored almost $100 million from the Mohegan Pequot Fund to towns and cities, which it was designed for. But right now, the legislature during the bad fiscal years swept it, and now when they're looking at an 18% reserve fund, why are they still sweeping that money designed to go to towns, and we're looking to see if we can grab that back in those, these fat budget years for the state.
Yeah. And some of the big priorities for municipalities tend to center around first responders and police a lot of times. Why is that?
Right now we're seeing, especially in our first responders, especially in our volunteer communities, maintaining our EMS departments, our fire departments is becoming more and more difficult. People don't work like they used to. They don't work in the community that they live in. So we're having a harder time staffing a lot of those volunteer fire departments. EMS reimbursement has always been tight, harder to staff up our ambulances. So we're really looking at recruitment, retention of, EMS, fire, police personnel. But we're also seeing that same shortage across the board. Just building inspectors, tax assessors, any number of zoning officials that are really key to when people want to do a home improvement project, start a new business. There's processes you have to go through, and we don't have the staffing. And I think it's being echoed across in the state and the private sector as well. And how do we bring in new bodies to fill those jobs?
And there's been a lot of discussion around climate and sustainability, of course, as well. A lot of things some in the state wanted to get done last session that kind of got left on the cutting room floor. One of those, sustainable waste management. A lot of people saying Connecticut has a trash problem. Tell me about the solutions that CCM is supporting this session.
CCM, we absolutely have a trash problem. With the closure of Mira, the trash to energy facility in Hartford, we're looking at now, we're shipping hundreds of tons of trash out of state, which is highly expensive. The tipping fees are going up. How do we reduce that? So CCM currently has a task force that's working on, is it a combination of reducing the amount of waste we produce? You have to look at, is there a big push towards organic composting to take some of that heavy material out of the stream? Also looking at what they call end user, end product, EPR, end product responsibility. So you get that package from Amazon and you get a small toy.
Right.
Then it comes in a giant box.
Right.
Are there ways to start looking at reducing the size of that excess packaging that comes? Because until we identify, a new, allowing our existing trash to energy facilities to burn more, or creating a, siting and building a new trash to energy facility, we're going to be required to still ship significant amounts out of state. So it's a very complex problem that we will look to address.
And we talked at the start, CCM is supporting these towns and these municipalities and kind of being a voice. We always talk on Real Story here about the importance of people testifying. We hear from lawmakers all the time that they want to hear from their constituents, from the residents, that it really does make a big difference. What is CCM's role in that? What do you hear from people, and what do you tell them if they want to get involved and get their voice heard?
We work obviously very closely with our mayors, our first selectmen. We also work closely with a variety of municipal associations that represent individual Park and Rec Association or the Assessors Association, and we work with them, encourage them to pay attention to the legislature, pay attention to the bills that are going on. And then, at a minimum, you can submit testimony if you don't want to go up in person. But if you have the opportunity, certainly come up and testify. And now that the legislature has, enabled kind of hybrid public hearings where you can testify via Zoom, it really makes it much easier. You don't get stuck sitting in a Hartford, in a hearing room and waiting for your 3 minutes. You can have your day, you get your notice, and you testify. So the opportunity for public input has grown, and I think, that discourse is important. The legislators need to hear not only from their local elected officials, but their residents, and how these proposals would impact them on a daily basis.
And last thing before I let you go here, we spent a lot of time talking about what still needs to be done, what those priorities are for this upcoming session, but is there anything that sticks out as an accomplishment or anything CCM really wants to highlight that has been done either in the past or past few legislative sessions?
I think we've really worked well with the legislature in increasing the amount of municipal aid in terms of reimbursement for tax-exempt properties. We've created a 3-tiered pilot and steadily been increasing the money that was owed for those properties that were exempted by law from property taxes, and the work we've done in education and closing that gap on ECS. We're not there yet, but it's a testament to the partnership between the legislature and our local officials and making sure we're getting those dollars back to where they needed.
All right. Well, Randy, thank you so much again for being here with us.
Oh, happy to come.
Of course, and you can count on us to keep you up to date on the legislative session from start to finish as we dive into close and continuous coverage for the next 3 months and sit down with your lawmakers. We want to know the questions you have. Connect on social media, or you can email newsteam@fox61.com or call the station. We're committed to bringing conversations about what's important to you on this show each Sunday. And you can find everything Real Story, from our weekly segments to our past discussions, online and on the free Fox 61 News app. Just go to the Real Story tab at the top of your screen. And of course, you can always find us streaming on Fox 61 Plus and on YouTube. That does it for us now this morning, but we'll see you right here next Sunday at 10 a.m. Have a great rest of your morning.